You gotta take the Lord with you everywhere you go. You've got to take the Lord with you.
Well, happy Sunday, Greenlawn. I am so excited to be here with my guest. We actually recorded for about a half an hour, and then my phone said not enough space. So we're going to try this again. I think we gave the best class of all times, but nobody will ever know. Yeah, only the birds and the dog will know. I'm so excited to be here with my guest today. He is the brother to my favorite woman in the world. He is the son to my favorite in-laws. He is the husband to my sweet sister-in-law, and he is the father to my super cool niece and nephew. Omar Palafox is my guest today, and I'm really glad to have him. Thankful to have him. We're brother-in-laws. I met him first in '94, and we've had a lot of crazy, fun adventures over the years. In the first one, we talked about replacing his plumbing. We were missionaries together in Mexico. We were there for about 6 years, and they were there for a few more years after that. Live here in Lubbock. Always grateful to have family nearby and get to spend time with family. But Omar is a Spanish teacher at Lubbock High. He is the pulpit preacher at Colgate Church of Christ. He is also getting his doctorate at Fuller. Sorry, I already asked. It's in missions, right? Just
intercultural studies, yeah.
Okay, yeah. Okay. And your undergrad and all your graduate work has been essentially missions, right?
Yeah, missions.
Okay, very good. And he will defend July 3rd. So it's coming up quick, Friday, July 3rd. And so very soon I'm going to have to call my brother-in-law, Dr. Palafox. But that'll be all right. I'll be super proud to get to do that. I'm thankful to have Omar with me today. I think he offers a very unique perspective. I've always considered him just a master teacher, both in Spanish and English. So I'm going to try to get out of his way for most of this. But I want to kind of give him a few questions in this context of Matthew chapter 9, 10 through 13. Jesus is at Matthew's house, and he is having dinner. And some of the Pharisees see him, and they ask the disciples, hey, what's up with your teacher eating with tax collectors and sinners? And Jesus says that he desires mercy. And he says, go and show compassion. Go and show mercy. I desire mercy. And so we're going to be looking at this concept in our series of go statements from Jesus. We're looking at this concept today of go show compassion to others. So I want to start out just by defining the word compassion. When you think about compassion, Omar, what does it mean to you?
Well, compassion feels to me that it's when you're acting on the behalf of somebody else with a lot of passion, with a lot of making sure that they're getting or they're receiving what they're needing, what they're wanting. It's almost seeing them as creation of God in God's image. So you are seeing God in those people, in those individuals that you are trying to help. So compassion will become just following our calling to be God's presence in the world, to people around us, creation, Yeah.
Very good. Yeah. As we think about making disciples, it's not just about going, but it's also about this idea of how we go. And compassion has to be one of our companions that we take with us, that we live out each and every day. And as we think about this idea of compassion, seeing others in the image of God, whatever economic, whatever cultural, whatever background that they come from, it's so important to see them as God's creation, somebody that Jesus died for. I desire mercy. Think about what God wants, and for him to say, mercy is what I really desire. Not giving what is owed or showing compassion, this idea of putting yourself in someone else's shoes. Omar, I want to ask you, what story or stories, what examples come to mind when you think about Jesus specifically being compassionate to others?
Yeah, I talked about the compassionate story when Jesus was at the temple and he was actually showing anger, showing this righteous desire to fix what was broken, to interact between the temple and the moneylenders and the people who wanted to worship, the people who wanted to be there. And he's really taking a posture of how can these individuals be loved, be reflected in how they connect to God. There was barriers, there was things in between, and they were just hindering people from becoming closer to God. So his compassion was shown in action, was shown in going and actually doing something for the individual instead of just feeling like, oh, I feel bad for them or they're good people. But he actually stepped into it with compassion, showing that they're equal to others and they should be in the presence of God. Yeah.
I like that. There's two things there that that's probably the last story. When I think about the compassion of Jesus, I don't think about him tossing temple tables. But you're right. There were people that were standing between God and someone else. And Jesus wanted that, whatever it was, people or stuff or whatever it was that was in between, he was going to take that out. Yeah, he was going to remove that. And so I love that idea of his story of compassion is actually a story that you and I might refer to as anger or righteous indignation or many other ways. But I think he's exactly right in that. I love the fact of putting yourself in someone else's shoes. What do they really need? What is it that person needs me to do for them? Too often we walk away. Yeah. I think we're kind of indifferent. Well, I don't want to cause a scene. I don't want it to be awkward. And so, as Omar mentioned, he stepped into it. He wasn't just going to hang back and we'll let somebody else. We'll see what else happens. So I think compassion is intentional. It's active.
Yeah, it has to
proactive,
go to that
maybe
place.
even.
And just to be able to know that they didn't choose to be there. Like it was something that was maybe forced upon them, or even if they did deserve that, I'm going to go out there and bring this gift to them. I want to be able to connect with them. And I think that's why crowds follow Jesus. People like that, the marginal, people that are broken, because he brought them a place of righteousness, a place of blessing. So, yeah, definitely.
Jesus was able to help people, not just on the cross, even pre the cross. He was able to help people connect with God in a very real way. And part of that was through his compassion, through the way he acted towards others. The way, I think compassion even goes back before actions. I want to talk about that for a minute. We'll talk about practicality and actions here in a minute, but kind of what's behind, we talked about this a little bit, but what's behind that compassion? How does that begin? How does that start in me? How am I supposed to be compassionate towards another?
Well, I think compassion has to be part of our lives. First of all, because it's commanded. God is asking us. He's telling us to be compassionate, And I think of the Old Testament passage that we mentioned, Exodus 23:5, about the donkey that is overloaded with this big, heavy load. And Scripture says that it's your enemy's animal. And you're asked to go and help this animal lift its own load if it can't move it. So the command of being compassionate to this moment where the animal is not able to lift this load, but it's not even your animal, it's somebody else's animal, your enemy's animal, and you're asked to consider being that instrument of bringing compassion to an animal, to a place that sometimes we would not think is our place to be. Okay, so I think compassion has to start in what we know of ourselves and who we are. Our identity is rooted in God's calling. This is what we do. We are his instruments. We are his hands, his feet. So in moments that sometimes I wouldn't want to be there, I don't want to lift somebody else's load. But at the same time, is equal to God. That's what he did. He came down to this earth. He took that role, us. We were his enemies. His wrath was upon us. We were just broken. And he came and he cleaned us. He put us in a righteous place. He gave us a good dress, He put us in the salvation mode. And I think that's what we need to do. So it begins in our heart and our understanding of other people being equal to God's creation. They're in his image, the Imago Dei, they're in the image of God. So we have to respect them and love them as much as he has loved us and respect us.
Yeah, so good. I think, I'm hearing this kind of, I guess the word paradigm, it's a change of the way we view things. It's seeing things differently. It's a God perspective on things rather than a convenience perspective or even in that moment. I like how you pointed out this wasn't something you planned. Okay, I'm going to schedule in on July 13th. I'm going to help this guy with this donkey. This is when you're walking along. This is when you're out sowing your seed. You're harvesting your seed. You're traveling. You're doing your own thing. I'm kind of reminded of the Good Samaritan. He was on a journey.
Yeah.
He was traveling, but he took compassion on the man. He stopped what he was doing to help somebody else.
Yeah, and I think compassion is really more about what is that other person needing instead of what I think that person needs, or what is it that I would need if I was in that place. It's based that perspective from their point of view.
Yeah.
If they need to be this, that, whatever their understanding of life in that moment is, we come and we provide that. We help them with that. You know?
Yeah.
A lot of times we want to equate them to us, and that's not what I mean by the image of God. That I wouldn't want that, so he should never want that. Well, we don't know that. They might need something totally different than we do.
Yeah.
But we put ourselves into that role of, okay, let's help them get that, provide that for them. So
Good.
yeah.
Well, and you bring up an interesting question. How do I know? Like, I don't know what you need. You just said that. I don't know what would be best for you. You know, for me, unsweet tea would be the best, but for you, you know, cherry limeade or whatever it is, you know, how do I even figure that out? How do I know how to show compassion? Obviously, if I see somebody hurt, flat tire, whatever, I can stop and help them with that. But we talk about real relationships that frequently come into contact. How do I find out? How do I discover?
I think it's relationships, you know, like I'm in the classroom with students at Lubbock High or in a place where you have all these students. The best thing they tell us to do always is to have relationship with the students. You're there as a teacher, but if you connect with them as a friend, as the individual who is there for them, man, you get to know what they're needing based on what they have told you. It takes relationship. It takes time to be with people and to know them at that level, you know. I mean, it's like a child. If you give a child what they need, they're not going to want it. They're not going to feel love. But if you put yourself in what is actually what they're looking for, the relationship that you have with them, he'll tell you. You know, they'll tell you, hey, this is what I want. Like you said, you might want to give them milk, but they really wanted water. And it was a lot easier for you to give water than milk, but a lot of times it's easier than we think. But we're not paying attention to what they're asking. And I think being able to listen to people, being able to even have ways or tools to be able to listen, that's great, you know. We just assume people want what we want. And I think it's maybe opposite.
Good. Good. So there's this idea of relationship. There's this idea of listening. There's this idea of trying to discover what it is that other person needs. Again, a donkey falling under its load's pretty obvious. Flat tire, pretty obvious. You know, somebody asks for a meal, it's pretty obvious what they need. I think sometimes in relationships we find ourselves kind of in a challenge because we don't, like Omar pointed out, we don't know what other people. I like, you know, Lay's potato chips and cottage cheese. It's a freak thing. It's a Gary thing. Most people think that's the weirdest thing ever. I love it. If I were to give it to somebody else, they'd be mad at me. You know, they're, why are you giving me this? They'd be offended. It comes down to listening to somebody else in relationship. That's so good. I want to ask you, Omar, and I want to kind of get real here for a minute because we are in a global pandemic, and that has heightened our already kind of electric, our very intense racial inequality, the way we view each other, the way we treat each other in various races. And so I want to kind of talk to this, or I want to hear you talk to this idea of, as a disciple, how do I show compassion in the midst of this kind of storm, in this kind of perfect storm, if you will, between COVID and then some of the racial riots and wrongful deaths and some wickedness that's really, really going on in our country? How do we show compassion in that? How do we respond? How do we react to that?
Well, I think most of the time is that we have to do these compassionate moments or these engagements outside of ourselves. You know, we are called to do and be in places that sometimes we're not because we are in a comfortable place. So I think in a place like this, those uncomfortable places are brought to our door, you know, like having to be in a pandemic or things like that. But it is so easy to just, in moments of fear, run to the comfortable places that we know. And sometimes being privileged or having special blessings that are great for us to be able to have, but some people don't have those things. You know, they struggle with the connecting of what they see and what they feel, and there's a huge disconnect in emotions and in people's lives. But I think just being compassionate is actually taking the time to see, where do I fit in this story? What is the role that I have to play here? And our culture does not teach us that. It doesn't come natural in our lives, and in the world of sports, competition, or like GPAs and all these things that they just encourage us to do your best, crush your enemy, or even in business, you have
Yeah.
to do your best, and financially just recover for things. But you're risking, and you're putting other people in places that are very uncomfortable for them. And you see kids who are left behind in the classroom. I see kids who are left behind by their parents because they're not being compassionate to their own kids, because they're looking for that success story, or they want to be a good business person, or a good career. And I think that's what we need to do. We need to be more willing to listen, be willing to pay attention, to create new ways and how we can go out there and engage those places that are uncomfortable, like lifting an animal up with a load. I mean, it requires for us to go and even leave some money behind, like in the Samaritan story,
Right.
In the hotel, and hey, if he needs anything, I'll come back to pay you. Like, it's not just about a wave or just like, hey, how's it going? I gave you a good meal. It requires for us to get out of our comfort zones, and I think today that's one of the struggles we have. We have a structured society, so everything was scheduled, budgeted, planned, organized. We have the flow of things, autumn and summer and all that kind of stuff. When this thing comes, he throw everything off the track, and he just shows our values. He shows what we really care for, and I think it's a good reflection time for us to think what we're doing. People struggle with even, are we going to have church or not? I mean, we should be thinking about how do we bless people? How do we show compassion to those who are broken? They have no salaries. They have no food on the tables. So,
Yeah, so good. I was you made me think about, the illustration of a pie, and there's a limited number of slices, and we tend to look at life as there's a limited number of slices, so I got to get the slices. Me and my family need a certain amount of slices, so I'm going to get all the slices I can get, rather than viewing life as maybe more stewardship. Jesus died for me. He showed me compassion that I might show it to others. This is what Jesus really desires. It's not a big 401k or winning the national champion, whatever it is. This is really about serving others, about loving others, about seeing what that other person needs, and really actively stepping into that, learning to listen, learning to help them have what they need. Obviously, we want to always balance that with truth, but I think that's the beauty of Jesus' truth is He is everything we need. And when we step into those relationships, I remember sitting with a friend recently, and he talked about relationships are formed around a table. When you eat, when you spend time with other people, it's exactly where Jesus was. He was forming a relationship at a table, and somebody was judging him for that. And we need to consider, even put ourselves into that story in there in Luke 9. Am I the guy was it Luke 9? Was it Matthew 9? I've already forgot. It's Matthew 9, 10 through 13. Am I the guy that's sitting in judgment? Am I the guy that's being a friend to tax collectors and sinners? Yeah. I want to talk to you for a minute because, oh man, the IRS. Somebody's got to collect taxes, but most of us love looking at our check and saying, they took how much of my, and you're like, man, if it wasn't for taxes, I'd have this much, several hundred or whatever extra a paycheck. And there's so much of our paychecks are taken by IRS, and we think about, it's almost one of those deals where you spit whenever you say the IRS. But what did it mean to be a tax collector in the first century? You think about Matthew, Levi being a tax collector. What would it mean? How would they be viewed from other Jews' perspectives? Because again, they're put in the sinners and the tax collectors as if they're these are the bad guys. These are the two people that are bad. What did it mean to be a tax collector?
Well, I mean, definitely, it's that idea that he was needing life. He was trying to make a living. He was trying to do what you're called to do. And I think it's okay for us to take care of ourselves too. I don't think compassion means you give up everything and you just go get to everybody, because then at the end of the day, you can't fix the world like that. But I think being a tax collector in Jesus' time was a person that was not welcome. That was that animal that was carrying a load.
Yeah, that's good.
And Jesus went out there and he helped him lift that load, and then even with a zealot, Jesus had a zealot, people that were different, Essenes, and people that normally we would not consider important. Jesus goes to their house, eats with them. He touches that leper. He feeds those 5,000. He's going to do this work that he's needing to do for compassion. And even like taking people out of the temple or making sure people are able to connect to the temple is a compassion thing for me, because I don't think compassion is loving and singing nice songs and just holding hands, and having nice candles. That's not necessarily compassion. Compassion is not just showing people the rosy road, whatever you call it. It's just being more engaged, intentional, being wise. How can we engage this in a way that is going to produce results that are benefit to what they're looking for, what they need? Yeah. And today especially, we have a broken system with medical. We have a broken system with education. Our politics are not shining. You have all these things that are core to our needs, and they're being threatened. So what we do is we just kind of protect ourselves instead of being able to open it up. And we need to learn to give as we do stuff instead of giving out of our abundance.
Yeah,
I think for years we've given out of abundance,
Right.
kind of like if a budget permits or if time permits, instead of actually making that the reason why we budget and the reason why we give
Yeah,
time.
that's good.
So I think obviously it takes time. It's an engaging thing, and as a leader of a church, man, it's hard to make those choices because people are used to traditions and things that we've done for so many years.
Yeah. Very good. I love that idea of this is what I'm all about, rather than out of the surplus. Yeah, I like that. This is priority. This takes first place, and then we'll make everything else work. And I sure appreciate Omar pointing out the fact that you've got to be able to eat. If you give all your money away and you can't buy food for yourself, you're worthless. Or if you've taken on the responsibility of a spouse or children, you also have to show them compassion. And so, yeah, Omar makes a great point there about balance in life and trying to take care of others, but also taking care of yourself, that you might be able to take care of others. When we talk about, making disciples, why is compassion so important? And I want to kind of give you the last thought on this in general, and we'll kind of conclude with that. But we think about making disciples, compassion, or again, any other thoughts. I'll let you kind of wrap us up. What do you see?
Well, I've been impressed with this story that when we come to God, we come very selfish. Like everybody comes to God.
Yeah.
And we come asking for, what can you give me? What can you provide for me? I mean, it was very immature, very, very newborn kind of person with Christ. As we get older, then we start asking the question, how can I give back to God? So we grow, we become more aware of, it's not just about taking, it's about giving, and eventually we get to the point that we are going to be saying, I don't care if you give me or I give you, I just want to be with God. So that process of growth has to happen in our lives, right? I mean, it's the way that we show love to people. So when I was looking for a person to marry, my wife, I was looking for the perfect girl that could bless me and give me what I needed, what I wanted, I didn't start thinking, oh, that girl really needs me, or I can provide this for her. It's like a totally opposite way. And I think what I'm saying is as a church, we're still thinking, how can we help people in a moment of need, because we are getting something back. It's not a place to start. People are going to be selfish when they're getting firsthand with God. They're going to see, they're going to need, they're going to touch anything that we put in front of them, and they're going to see God in those things. So our compassionate to be shown in these things is really opening that first door, that first step where people can come into God. And if we are on the second step with them, what can you give God? They're never going to come to God that way.
No,
because it's not about just them coming to give something. It's about us offering them. And I know it might be immature. It might be like so needy of people. But man, a lot of times people sell their soul for a cup of coffee. They sell their soul for whatever, because we are so much in need. And that's the key here. When people are broken and we are needy, oh man, when somebody gives you that one drink or that one pat on the back, it's like heaven. It's like everything, And when they touch that heart, then they begin to see, man, I want to know more. And eventually they'll get to the next level, and they'll get to the next level. I think they get to places where God is going to be important with us, whether we're rich or poor or broken, whatever. But we know that they don't start there. So I think as a church, discipleship has to start with that. It's going to take a lot. I mean, we do that with youth groups, right? Youth groups and little kids classes, they're not giving much to the church.
Yeah.
But we still provide for them. We still open up for them. We still give them what they need. And because we are investing with them for a long term,
Right.
we don't start with, okay, how much money are you offering? How much you give to the church?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's just the opposite. And I think showing compassion in those moments and is rooted in the gospel. I think the more we see what the gospel really means, what is it that he gave me? Because we think sometimes that we're giving God a favor. Like, hey, I'm doing you a favor by being at church, God. No, I mean, he took us from the place that was broken
Yeah.
in his wrath, and to know that we were that person that he offered compassion,
Yeah.
then it should just make us feel like, I need to offer that back to people.
Yeah.
I need to be compassionate. I need to know that they need this. They might not necessarily even deserve it because they did some bad choices, they bad mistakes.
Sure.
But it's not about deserving or not deserving. It's about what they're needing in that moment.
Yeah.
And if we can extend our hand and we can help them lift that load, that would be a great blessing. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Very good. It's been so good to be with Omar a second time now. Hopefully this one recorded and we've got it. But I'm thankful for the words of wisdom he's shared and just kind of, again, taking that perspective off of us, learning to see others as God sees them, learning to listen, learning to love, learning to provide for the needs that they have, really putting that focus on people. That's Jesus says, I desire mercy. Go and show compassion. So that's our challenge for you this week. As we wrap up this lesson, I pray that you will just be challenged and encouraged in that idea of go and show compassion. Be blessed.
Thank you, guys.
In the street.